Over the last few years, I've often talked about how Nvidia's cyclical successes hide some deep problems that hedge on there being no serious competition and on an entrenched software stack like CUDA. As AI progresses, people are starting to realize that a walled garden approach will not meet the ever-increasing demands for AI in the data center, where flexibility is key. But so far, no one has been able to disrupt Nvidia's dominance. Well, industry veterans Jim Keller and Raja Koduri might have just found the formula that will take the green giant down. Today's video is sponsored by urcdkeys.com. If you buy a retail Windows 10 key, you could spend $100 or more. But if you buy an OEM key from urcdkeys.com, a Windows 10 Pro key will cost you only $15 when you use the coupon code C25. The keys work globally, and you can even get a free upgrade to Windows 11 from Microsoft. After you've made your purchase, you will find your key in your purchased orders in the URCD Keys website. Click on Get Keys and copy the key. Then in Windows, click on Start and type Activate, and then click Activation Settings. Then click Change Product Key, paste your key you just purchased, and click Next. Your copy of Windows is now activated. If you want Office 2021 Professional, you can use the same C25 discount code and get it for just $65. URCD Keys is running a mid-year sale with some cool mechanical keyboards, gaming mice, and even gaming chairs. A big thanks to urcdkeys.com for sponsoring today's video. Check the links in the description to get your cheap OEM Windows keys today. So what exactly is Transtorrent? They are primarily a design company designing CPU and AI IP. Customers from different segments will come to Transtorrent and license their IP and build their own chips. The bet from Jim Keller here is that open source eventually wins out. So instead of closed proprietary IP, using RISC-V was the natural progression for the company. Just like in software, the server world runs on Linux, not on Windows NT, Keller believes the same will happen with hardware, and that RISC-V will eventually win. One of the main advantages to RISC-V compared to ARM or x86 is that there is no licensing fee. You own the platform, so there are no surprises. Licensing fees don't go up. But what sets Transtorrent apart from, say, ARM or Nvidia or AMD? An example of how Transtorrent differentiate themselves from the incumbent is their 106 core, which they've recently licensed to LG to go into their TVs. LG is an interesting company because in addition to their panels technology, they also have their own chips and IP portfolio. LG wanted IP that was programmable, that they could own, and that they could modify to fit their needs. Why not just get a solution from, say, Nvidia or ARM? Well, if LG wants to put AI features into their TVs, during the development cycle alone, the models could stop working on whatever IP they choose if it's not programmable and open to modifying. In the span of just the last 2 years alone, we've gone from narrow 8-bit integer that's hard to program, to inference and training, to big models versus small models, to generative and non-generative. So those who targeted specific IPs saw their chips not working for the new emerging models. This is one of the reasons why Nvidia has been so successful with CUDA, because GPUs can adapt to new models. They are not ideal because they are still narrow even when parallelizing workloads, but at least they are programmable and widely adopted, and relatively affordable through the cloud, at least compared to developing your own chip. So back to the LG example. LG wanted something that was programmable and that they could own and modify, something that would not be possible with Nvidia IP, or AMD IP, or ARM, but is with Transtorrent's RISC-V solution. AI is progressing with blurred borders between inference and training, image and language, generative and non-generative. A good example is called Stable Diffusion, which has a language model and an image model with a backpass of a training pipeline. It's generative, it's all things combined, and no current IP is specifically designed to address all of those in an efficient manner. This is why I've talked about hybrid approaches likely succeeding over something like Nvidia's walled garden GPU strategy in the mid to long run. Beyond just IP, what specific products is Transtorrent planning to sell? These range from $30 chips that can go into power supplies to run AI models inside as a more efficient approach to a control system. There is no programmable IP out there for how power supplies work. Transtorrent can solve that problem. Then there could be a $500 chiplet for a new AI emerging model, and currently Transtorrent's first card is going to sell between $1,000 to $2,000, so a wide range of offerings that can scale to different segments. The principle, though, is always the same: a cost-effective, open, programmable solution to an ever-evolving ecosystem, just like what Linux did for software, just like what Android did for smartphones. Transtorrent could be the greatest threat to NVIDIA's closed vertical approach. When a customer goes to NVIDIA with a problem, NVIDIA's response is, here's an A100, here's the software stack, it's proprietary, it's encrypted, and the support you get is on these PDFs and videos. It costs $40,000. Take it or leave it. The more you buy, the more you save. Transtorrent is coming in with a completely different model, one that's open, hybrid, adaptable, and that customers can mold to their needs with more personalized support. It's a complete paradigm shift compared to what the incumbents are doing. In an open ecosystem, you can modify the software stack, you can optimize performance, you can own it, you can look into the details, it's exposed. If you look at the comments in my last video, you'll see that people's reaction to the idea that Goliaths like Intel or Nvidia can be dethroned is that of extreme skepticism. I think recency bias is clouding people's judgment. Look at IBM. Their downfall didn't happen overnight. It was long coming. Look at Sun Microsystems. What about the Motorola 68000, the Zilog Z80, the MOS 6502? Why didn't those stick around? Intel started a new cycle back then. This industry runs in cycles, and one of the inevitable roads that corporations take as they grow is investor pandering and the relentless pursuit of increasing margins at any cost. Look at AMD 5 years ago and look at them now. Look at what Nvidia is selling their GPUs for. As corporations grow, they become dehumanized. A system of slow self-destruction takes hold as tension between what investors, boards, and the market want conflicts with what makes technology advance, innovation and constant disruption of established paradigms with more efficient solutions. You really think Nvidia is immune to all this? At the top of a curve peak, short-sighted people always think, why would this change? It will stay like this forever. Yet history has shown time and again that this is never the case. Just look at the last 100 years. Is the whole world going to fit Nvidia's business model eternally? What if the whole world changes and decides to follow a different direction? What will Nvidia's market cap of $1 trillion do then? How will their stock price help customers in any way? Put superficial metrics aside and leave your recency bias behind, and you're left with very few avenues for Nvidia to take to adjust to a paradigm shift. Think about this. In the last few years in this AI bubble, the models have been shared between the community, most open. The research has been published. Models have been replicated. It's one of the reasons why it spread like wildfire. Someone publishes a model, another replicates it and improves upon it. We saw image generation going from a blurry mess to Midjourney in a matter of months, thanks to this openness. In all of this open environment of continuous sharing and synergistic growth, one thing has remained closed: hardware. As a result, the solution to more processing is not better hardware that's continuously leapfrogging itself, but more hardware. Deploy more GPUs. That's the solution. At $40,000 or $80,000 a pop as it's being reported. Does that sound like a sustainable business model to you? The cost to build the truly big, great models is absurdly high. Nvidia is obviously happy with that because it has created a moat. It's not going to be easy to disrupt their model. The amount of money they will make this year should make it clear how deep the moat that they've created is. With costs this high, do you really think the market will accept only Microsoft, Google, and Meta being able to deploy the next generation of models because it costs billions to train them? No, the market will find a way to access cheaper hardware. That you can be sure of. Now, one thing is to disrupt small edge configurable segments. Another is, say, whole data centers or HPC. But Jim Keller seems to think that even that, the incumbents have another thing coming. My belief is that over the next 5 to 10 years, RISC-V will take over all the data centers, especially supercomputers. We've talked to multiple supercomputer guys and they're like, we're the world's expert on vectorizing compiler, vector floating point performance, local memory, and then they go to the big vendors, so he's referring to Intel, AMD, and Nvidia, and they say, I want these changes, and the vendors all sensibly say no. According to Keller, one of the key factors for RISC-V taking over is how how fast the software ecosystem is evolving. Within the data center ecosystem, even though Intel systems are running Linux, a lot of the system management software is proprietary still. So when AMD introduced EPYC, it didn't work as intended in many instances because AMD didn't have access to Intel's proprietary software. Engineers at AMD had to write all of that, and it took a long time to materialize. When you hear Lisa Su saying that EPYC is sampling with customers, well, one of the things happening is looking at what needs to be built in order for the chips to even work. Compare that with RISC-V. In less than 6 months, Trendstorrent got a full server stack working for one of their customers in India because there's no proprietary code to worry about. Google is porting Android to RISC-V, and many other big companies have internal RISC-V software teams. Kala believes software development for RISC-V will accelerate at a much greater pace than the status quo and surpass the incumbents in less than a decade. Now you might be thinking, well, what about Amazon? What about Facebook? Aren't hyperscalers like them making their own chips? They haven't had much of an impact on Nvidia. How is Trendstorrent any different? Well, Amazon or Facebook, or Apple for that matter, making their own chips has a cumulative effect of ultimately raising margins or reducing the cost of purchasing chips from someone else. But that only works because they have huge volume. An additional benefit of building their own chips is that they can optimize for their needs. With off-the-shelf solutions like Nvidia's GPUs, they couldn't. Same with Tesla, which is why they abandoned Nvidia for their own internal solution. So Amazon's Graviton saves Amazon money because they are buying wafers directly from TSMC instead of going through a margin stack of AMD and then Dell all getting a cut. And they also save money because Graviton runs Amazon's workloads more efficiently than an EPYC or Xeon chip ever would. But the outlook is that servers won't be exclusive to the Amazons and Microsofts of this world, not only because of cost, but also because of capacity. This will be incredibly disruptive for the semiconductor industry. Currently, you have Intel and Nvidia leading the technology trends, with AMD following Intel in CPU land and AMD following Nvidia in GPU land. But in the next 10 years, because the market will require much more capacity, and because smaller players can't build their own chips like Amazon or Google and won't be able to afford renting from the cloud for huge models, we could see 50 chip makers instead of 3. We're already seeing a few ARM alternatives popping up. Think about it, did the GPU market start with just Nvidia and AMD? There were tons of companies making GPUs trying to capitalize on the emergence of 3D graphics. Again, cycles. The semiconductor industry is all about cycles. In the seminal book Computer Architecture, a quantitative approach, which I've referenced many times in the last 7 years on this channel, the core argument for technological advancement in computer architecture is specialization. I've covered this topic before, and it traverses AI as well. There will be specialized hardware made for things like large language models, specialized hardware to run the next ChatGPT, and like I talked about in my last video, part of that processing will happen in the server, and another part will be running locally on devices, be it on your phone or tablet or PC. The question is, who will make that specialized hardware? The incumbents or new players? Well, a better question might be, how do you dethrone Nvidia? The simple answer is you can't, at least not by doing the same thing that Nvidia is doing, but worse. Why do you think AMD in the consumer space is fading into irrelevance? People were mad when I called the 7900s the worst product AMD has ever made, because they were too emotionally attached to see the missed opportunity that AMD had. Disrupting the GPU market with chiplets was a way to bring a real challenge to Nvidia, but AMD completely butchered that with a terrible pricing strategy. AMD will never dethrone Nvidia by doing the same thing that Nvidia is doing, because Nvidia has billions of dollars invested into this every year, and thousands more people working on very focused problems. The only way to dethrone Nvidia, be it in the consumer space or in the server space or AI, is to offer something radically different. In the book The Innovator's Dilemma from the late Clayton Christensen, there are several examples of big corporations failing to see the potential of new emerging and disruptive technologies. It's a book I highly recommend. It might seem crazy now, but companies making hard disks paid no attention to SSDs. SSDs were more expensive, offered less capacity, in a time where customers for drives were asking for more capacity and lower prices. What did the executives do regarding SSDs? They disregarded them. They didn't meet the criteria for expanding the hard disk market. Yet, look at the market today. SSD AMD's completely disrupted that segment. The way to dethrone Nvidia is to look at the things Nvidia are not doing, the things Nvidia are ignoring because they don't meet what their core customers are asking for, nor do they increase margins. Nvidia is not creating an open stack for AI, there's one. Nvidia isn't interested in letting their customers tailor their GPUs to their needs, there's another. Disrupting Nvidia in the consumer space is also incredibly obvious. I've talked about Amdahl's law several times, and when the RTX 2080 Ti was announced back in 2018, I talked about the limits of parallelizing ray tracing, which is a workload that translates really well into a parallelized architecture like a GPU. But even there's a finite limit to how much you can improve performance by just adding more cores. Do you see where this is going? I was incredibly excited about AMD's move to chiplet GPUs until I saw the execution. If you want to disrupt Nvidia, be it in the consumer space or in AI, you need to specialize parallelization. Many years ago, I covered a company that was doing just that. That company ended up being bought, and today we have Intel's Thread Director, a shadow of what it could have been. The road to parallelized specialization could come from a couple of dark horse technologies, perhaps in the analog realm or in neuromorphic computing. But one thing is for sure, you are not beating Nvidia at their game. But that's a story for another day. For now, Transtorrent seems to have nailed down how it will address market needs that Nvidia simply can't, and the rest of the industry should take note. It's not so much about RISC-V versus x86 or CUDA per se, but more about how entropy increases as corporations grow and dehumanize, and how that represents a big opportunity for disruption. This video was made possible by my awesome patrons. If you join my Patreon, you will gain access to the Cortex Discord server, where myself and a welcoming community of tech enthusiasts discuss tech every day. If you can't contribute financially at this time, then please share this video as that really helps. Thanks for watching, and until the next one.